The hospital room was completely silent except for the steady beep of the heart monitor. Alexander Kane, the 32-year-old billionaire who owned half the city's skyscrapers, lay alone in his bed, staring at the white ceiling. His phone sat on the bedside table, black and silent. Not one call, not one text, not one visitor. 6 months ago, this same phone would ring every minute with people wanting his attention, his money, his time. Beautiful women would fight each other just to be seen with him. Business partners would beg for meetings. Friends, or people he thought were friends, would throw parties in his honor. But now, nothing. The cancer had taken more than just his health. It had stripped away everything he thought mattered, revealing a truth so painful it hurt worse than any chemotherapy. Nobody had ever really loved him. They had loved his money, his power, his fame, but not him. As tears rolled down his pale cheeks, Alexander heard the soft sound of footsteps in the hallway. Someone was coming. But who? His heart raced with hope, thinking maybe, just maybe, someone cared enough to visit. The door opened slowly, and what happened next would change his life in ways he never imagined. 8 months earlier, Alexander Kane stood on the balcony of his penthouse apartment, looking down at the city that belonged to him. At 32, he was worth more money than most countries. His company built the tallest buildings, owned the biggest hotels, and controlled more businesses than he could count. "Sir, your date for tonight has arrived," his butler James announced from behind him. Alexander sighed. Another model, another actress, another woman who saw dollar signs when she looked at him. This one was named Victoria, tall, blonde, and beautiful in the way that cost thousands of dollars in surgery and makeup. "Mr. Kane!" Victoria squealed when she saw him, throwing her arms around his neck. "I missed you so much." They had met exactly once, 2 weeks ago at a charity event. But already she was talking about missing him, about how much she cared, about their future together. Over dinner at the city's most expensive restaurant, Victoria talked non-stop about all the places she wanted to travel, the jewelry she admired, the cars she dreamed of owning. She never asked Alexander how he was feeling, what he enjoyed doing, or what made him happy. "You're so generous," she purred, touching his hand across the table. "I just know we're going to be so happy together. I was thinking maybe for my birthday next month we could go shopping. I saw this beautiful diamond necklace that would look perfect on me." Alexander nodded and smiled, but inside his heart felt empty. This was his life. People who pretended to love him while counting his money in their heads. After dinner, Victoria kissed him goodnight with lips that felt cold despite their warmth. "Call me tomorrow, baby. I love you." But Alexander knew she didn't love him. She loved what he could buy for her. That night, alone in his huge bedroom, Alexander stared at his reflection in the mirror. He had everything anyone could want. Cars worth more than houses, watches that cost more than people made in a year, clothes from the most famous designers in the world. So why did he feel so lonely? 3 months later, Alexander had been feeling tired for weeks, but he ignored it. Rich people didn't get sick. They had the best doctors, the best food, the best everything. When he started losing weight and couldn't eat his favorite foods, he told himself it was just stress from work. But when he collapsed during an important business meeting, falling right off his chair onto the expensive carpet, everyone knew something was seriously wrong. "We need to run some tests," Dr. Stevens said after examining Alexander at the private hospital. "I want to be careful and check everything." The tests took 3 days. During that time, Alexander's phone rang constantly. Victoria called crying, saying she was so worried. His business partners sent flowers and fruit baskets. Everyone seemed to care so much. But then Dr. Stevens called him into his office with results that changed everything. "I'm sorry, Alexander," the doctor said gently. "You have cancer. It's aggressive and it's spread to several organs. We need to start treatment immediately." The words hit Alexander like a truck. Cancer. The disease that didn't care about money or power or fame. The great equalizer that could bring down kings and billionaires just as easily as anyone else. "How long do I have?" Alexander asked, his voice shaking. "With treatment, we're hoping for the best," Dr. Stevens said carefully. "But you'll need to stay in the hospital for several months. The chemotherapy will be intense." Alexander's hands trembled as he called Victoria first. "Cancer?" she gasped when he told her. But you're so young and healthy. Are you sure?" "The doctors are sure. Alexander said sadly. I'll be in the hospital for months, Victoria. I wanted you to know. There was a long pause. Oh, she said finally. Well, I... I hope you get better soon. I have to go now. I'm meeting friends for lunch. And that was it. No offer to visit, no words of comfort, no promise to be there for him. Just a quick goodbye and the dial tone. One by one, Alexander called the people in his life. One by one, they all found excuses not to visit. Business meetings, vacation plans, family obligations. Suddenly, everyone was too busy for the billionaire who was no longer healthy and strong. St. Mary's Hospital wasn't as fancy as the private clinics Alexander usually visited, but it had the best cancer treatment center in the state. His room was nice enough, private, with a view of the garden and all the medical equipment money could buy. But it was the loneliest place he'd ever been. The first week was the worst. The chemotherapy made him sick in ways he'd never imagined. He couldn't eat, could barely sleep, and felt weak as a baby. His thick black hair started falling out in chunks, and his face became pale and thin. His phone used to ring all day long. Now it was silent for hours at a time. Victoria sent flowers once, cheap ones from the grocery store, with a card that said, "Get well soon," but she never came to visit. His business partners sent emails asking about work, but none of them came to see how he was doing. Alexander had never felt so alone in his entire life. That's when he first noticed her. It was his third week in the hospital, and Alexander was having one of his worst days. The medicine had made him so sick he couldn't stop throwing up. He was weak, scared, and felt like giving up entirely. "Knock, knock," came a gentle voice from his doorway. "Is it okay if I come in?" Alexander looked up to see a black woman in scrubs standing in his doorway. She was about his age, with kind eyes and a warm smile that seemed genuine, something he hadn't seen in a long time. "I'm Maya," she said, stepping into the room. "I'm one of the night nurses. I heard you were having a rough day." Maya wasn't like the other nurses who treated him differently because he was famous and rich. She didn't ask for autographs or take secret pictures with her phone. She just sat down in the chair next to his bed and asked, "How are you feeling?" And I want the real answer, not the polite one. Something about her voice made Alexander feel safe enough to tell the truth. "Terrible," he admitted. "I feel like I'm dying and I'm scared. And I'm all alone." Maya nodded like she understood. Cancer is scary. Being sick is scary. And feeling alone makes everything worse. She stayed with him for an hour that night, just talking, not about his money or his companies or his fame, just normal conversation about books, movies, and life. When he felt sick again, she held a cool cloth to his forehead and didn't leave until he felt better. "I'll see you tomorrow night," Maya said as she left. "Try to get some rest." For the first time in weeks, Alexander smiled as he fell asleep. Over the next few weeks, Maya became the highlight of Alexander's days. She worked the night shift and he found himself staying awake just to talk with her. Maya was different from anyone he'd ever met. She lived in a tiny apartment across town and took the bus to work every day because she couldn't afford a car. Her nursing salary barely covered her bills, and she often ate peanut butter sandwiches for dinner because it was all she could afford. But she was the richest person Alexander had ever known. Rich in kindness, in compassion, in genuine care for others. "Why did you become a nurse?" Alexander asked one night as Maya checked his medicine. "My grandmother was sick when I was little," Maya said softly. "The nurses at her hospital were so kind to our family. They made the scariest time of my life a little less scary. I wanted to do that for other people." Alexander thought about all the reasons people usually wanted to be around him: his money, his connections, his power. Maya was the first person who wanted to help people simply because it was the right thing to do. "Tell me about your family," Maya said, settling into her usual chair. Alexander's face fell. "I don't really have one. My parents died when I was young, and I don't have any brothers or sisters. I have employees and business partners, but no real family." "What about friends?" Maya asked gently. Alexander laughed bitterly. "I thought I had friends, but when I got sick, they all disappeared. Turns out they were only friends with my wallet." Maya looked sad for him. "That must hurt so much." "It does," Alexander admitted. "I'm starting to think I've wasted my whole life chasing the wrong things." "It's never too late to change," Maya said. "Some of the best people I know didn't find their real path until later in life." Night after night, they talked about everything: their dreams, their fears, their childhoods, their hopes for the future. Alexander told Maya about feeling empty, despite having everything money could buy. Maya told Alexander about her struggles to pay rent and buy groceries, but how helping patients made her feel rich in ways that mattered. "I've never met anyone like you," Alexander said one night. "You're so real, so good." Maya blushed. "I'm just a regular person, Alexander. I'm not special." "You're the most special person I've ever met," Alexander said honestly. "You're here with me not because of what I can give you, but because you actually care. That's the most precious gift anyone has ever given me." One night in his fourth month at the hospital, Alexander woke up from a nightmare, screaming and covered in sweat. The cancer treatment was affecting his mind, making him confused and scared. He didn't remember where he was or what was happening to him. "Where am I?" he cried out, looking around the dark room in panic. "What's happening to me?" Maya rushed into his room immediately. "It's okay, Alexander. You're safe. You're in the hospital, and I'm here with you." But Alexander was too confused and frightened to understand. He tried to get out of bed but was too weak, and he started crying like a scared child. Without hesitation, Maya climbed into the narrow hospital bed beside him and held him close. "Shh," she whispered, stroking his head where his hair used to be. "You're safe. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." She stayed there all night, holding him while he slept, making sure he knew he wasn't alone. When other nurses walked by and saw them, they might have thought it was unprofessional. But Maya didn't care. Alexander needed comfort, and she was going to give it to him. When Alexander woke up the next morning, Maya was still there, her arm around him protectively. "You stayed," he said in wonder. "I told you I wasn't going anywhere," Maya said simply. In that moment, Alexander felt something he'd never experienced before: unconditional love. Someone who cared about him when he had nothing to offer in return. Someone who stayed when he was at his weakest and most vulnerable. That's when he realized he was falling in love with Maya. And from the way she looked at him, not with pity or duty, but with genuine affection, he began to hope that maybe, just maybe, she was falling in love with him too. But would a woman like Maya, good, pure, honest, ever love a man like him? A man who had spent his whole life caring only about money and power? As Alexander watched Maya prepare his morning medicine with gentle hands and a caring smile, he knew his life had changed forever. The question was, what would happen when he got better and left the hospital? Would this beautiful connection survive in the real world, or would it disappear like everything else in his life? The answer would come sooner than he expected, and it would test everything they had built together. "Mr. Kane, I have some wonderful news," Dr. Stevens said, walking into Alexander's hospital room with the biggest smile he'd worn in months. Alexander sat up in bed, his heart racing. After 6 long months of treatment, of pain, of uncertainty, he was almost afraid to hope. Maya stood beside his bed, holding his hand tightly. She had been there for his appointment, just like she'd been there for everything else. "The latest scans show that the cancer is completely gone," Dr. Stevens announced. "You're in full remission. We can discharge you tomorrow." The room erupted in joy. Maya burst into tears of happiness, throwing her arms around Alexander. "You did it! You beat it!" she cried. Alexander held her close, but his emotions were mixed. Yes, he was thrilled to be healthy again, but leaving the hospital meant leaving Maya. In this small room, they had created their own little world where love mattered more than money. But what would happen in the real world? "I'm so happy for you," Maya whispered through her tears. "You're going to have your life back." But as Alexander looked into her beautiful eyes, he realized something that shocked him. He didn't want his old life back. He wanted a completely new life, with Maya. The question was, would she want the same thing? The next morning came too quickly. Alexander packed his few belongings, mostly books Maya had brought him, and get-well cards from the hospital staff. His expensive clothes from before hung loose on his thinner frame, but he was alive. He was healthy. He was free. Maya helped him gather his things, but she was quieter than usual. The joy from yesterday had been replaced by something that looked like sadness. "You're going to do great out there," she said, not meeting his eyes. "Back to your real life, your business, your world." "Maya," Alexander said, taking her hands in his. "What we have here, what we've built together, this is real. This is the most real thing in my life." Maya looked up at him with tears in her eyes. "Alexander, you're a billionaire. I'm just a nurse who can barely pay her rent. In here we're just 2 people. But out there, We're from completely different worlds. I don't care about different worlds, Alexander said desperately. I care about you. But Maya shook her head sadly. You say that now. But when you get back to your penthouse, your fancy cars, your business meetings, when beautiful rich women start calling you again, you'll remember who you really are. And you'll forget about the poor nurse who took care of you when you were sick. That will never happen, Alexander insisted. Maya, Mr. Kane? A voice interrupted them. Alexander's assistant, Janet, appeared in the doorway with a clipboard and her usual business expression. Your car is here. We have 17 meetings scheduled for this week, and the board is waiting for your return. Just like that, the real world came crashing back in. Alexander looked between Janet and Maya, feeling torn in two. Maya gave him a sad smile and stepped back. Go, she said quietly. This is your life. I understand. Maya, wait. Alexander started, but she was already walking toward the door. Take care of yourself, Alexander, she said without turning around. I'm glad you're better. And then she was gone. Alexander stood there feeling more lost than he had during his entire cancer treatment. He had beaten the disease, but it felt like he was losing the only thing that really mattered. Alexander's penthouse had never felt so cold and empty. Everything was exactly as he'd left it 6 months ago. The expensive furniture, the priceless art, the view of the city he owned, but none of it meant anything anymore. Within hours of his return, his phone started ringing again. Business partners welcoming him back, investors wanting meetings, and yes, women calling to congratulate him on his recovery. Alexander, darling, Victoria's voice sang through the phone. I heard the wonderful news. I've missed you so much. Let's celebrate tonight. I know this amazing new restaurant. Alexander hung up without saying a word. For the next 2 weeks, he threw himself back into work, trying to forget about Maya and convince himself that she was right. They were from different worlds. He attended board meetings, signed million-dollar deals, and tried to rebuild his empire. But every night, he lay in his huge bed staring at the ceiling, remembering Maya's gentle voice, her kind smile, the way she made him feel like he mattered not for what he owned, but for who he was. His assistant Janet noticed the change immediately. Sir, you seem different, she said one afternoon. Distracted. Is everything all right? I'm fine, Alexander lied, signing documents without really reading them. But he wasn't fine. He was miserable. Success felt hollow. Money felt meaningless. His penthouse felt like a prison. He had spent 6 months learning what love really meant, and now he was back to a life without it. 3 weeks after leaving the hospital, Alexander couldn't take it anymore. He had to see Maya again. He had to tell her how he felt. He had to fight for the only real thing he'd ever had in his life. But when he called the hospital, he got devastating news. I'm sorry, Mr. Kane, the head nurse said. Maya doesn't work here anymore. She quit 2 weeks ago. Alexander's heart sank. Do you know where she went? I'm sorry, I can't give out personal information about former employees. Alexander hung up, feeling desperate. Maya could be anywhere. She could have left the city, left the state, started a new life somewhere else. How would he ever find her? That's when Alexander did something he'd never done before in his business career. He used his money not to make more money, but to help someone he loved. He hired the best private investigators in the city. He put up a reward for information about Maya's whereabouts. He searched every hospital, every clinic, every medical facility in a 100-mile radius. For 5 days, he found nothing. It was like Maya had disappeared completely. Then, on the 6th day, one of his investigators called with news. We found her, Mr. Kane. She's working at a free clinic in the poorest part of the city, place called Hope Medical Center. Alexander didn't even wait for his driver. He got in his car and drove across town as fast as he could, his heart pounding with hope and fear. Hope Medical Center was nothing like the fancy hospitals Alexander was used to. It was a small, run-down building in a neighborhood where his expensive car looked completely out of place. But he didn't care. He pushed through the front doors and immediately saw her. Maya was at the reception desk, talking to an elderly man in Spanish, helping him fill out forms. She looked just as beautiful as ever, but there was something sad in her eyes that hadn't been there before. Maya, Alexander called out. She looked up and froze when she saw him. For a moment, neither of them moved. Alexander? She said in shock. What are you doing here? How did you find me? I've been looking for you for a week, Alexander said, walking toward her. We need to talk. Maya looked around at the crowded clinic, then back at him. I'm working. I can't just— Please, Alexander said, and something in his voice made her stop arguing. 20 minutes later, they sat on a bench in the small park across from the clinic. The silence between them felt heavy with everything they hadn't said. Why did you quit the hospital? Alexander asked finally. Maya looked down at her hands. I couldn't stay. Every room, every hallway reminded me of us, of something that couldn't be real. It was real, Alexander said firmly. It is real. Maya, these past 3 weeks have been the worst of my life, worse than having cancer, because I've been living without you. Maya shook her head. Alexander, be practical. You're worth billions of dollars. I work at a free clinic making barely enough to survive. Your world is penthouses and private jets. Mine is bus rides and peanut butter sandwiches. We can't— I don't want my world without you in it, Alexander interrupted. Maya, you taught me what really matters. You showed me what love actually looks like. I don't care about the money or the penthouses or any of it if I can't share it with you. Tears started falling down Maya's cheeks. You don't understand how different we are. You're right, we are different, Alexander said, taking her hands. You're kind, and I was selfish. You're generous, and I was greedy. You care about helping people, and I only cared about making money. But Maya, you made me want to be better. You made me want to be the man you saw in me during those nights in the hospital. Alexander, Maya whispered. I love you, Alexander said, his voice breaking with emotion. Not because you took care of me when I was sick, but because you showed me what my life could be if I chose love over money, if I chose you over everything else. Maya was crying harder now. I love you too. I've loved you since that first night when you let me see how scared and alone you were. But love isn't enough, Alexander. The differences between us are exactly what we need, Alexander finished. You need someone who can take care of you the way you take care of everyone else. And I need someone who loves me for who I am, not what I have. We complete each other, Maya. Maya looked into Alexander's eyes and saw something she'd never seen before. Not just love, but certainty. This wasn't a rich man playing with a poor woman's heart. This was a man who had found his purpose. What are you saying? She whispered. Alexander slid off the bench and got down on one knee right there in the tiny park, pulling out a ring box he'd been carrying for 3 days. I'm saying marry me, Maya Johnson, not because I'm rich and you're not, but because you make me rich in all the ways that actually matter. Marry me because we found each other in the darkest moment of my life and created something beautiful. Marry me because I want to spend the rest of my life loving you and supporting your dreams the way you supported me. Maya gasped when she saw the ring, not a huge, flashy diamond that screamed wealth, but a simple, elegant band with a stone that sparkled like her eyes. I know your dream is to help people, Alexander continued. What if we built a medical center together? A place where you could treat patients for free, where money never matters. I have the resources and you have the heart. Together, we could change lives. Alexander, Maya sobbed, are you sure? Really sure? Because if I say yes, there's no going back. I'm not going to change who I am or where I come from. I don't want you to change anything, Alexander said. I want you to stay exactly who you are. The woman who taught me that the richest person in the world is the one who has someone to love and someone who loves them back. Maya looked at him for a long moment, seeing not the billionaire, not the man in the expensive suit, but the scared patient who had held her hand in the dark and shared his deepest fears. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I'll marry you. Alexander slipped the ring onto her finger and pulled her into his arms, spinning her around as people in the park stopped to watch and smile. For the first time in his life, Alexander felt truly wealthy. The wedding was nothing like what Alexander's old friends expected. Instead of a fancy ballroom with hundreds of guests, they got married in the chapel at the new Maya Cain Medical Center, the free clinic they had built together in Maya's old neighborhood. Maya wore a simple white dress that made her look like an angel. Alexander wore a suit, but not one that cost more than most people's cars. Their guests were not celebrities and business tycoons, but patients Maya had helped, nurses she had worked with, and families from the community. Do you, Alexander Cain, take Maya to be your wife? The minister asked. I do, Alexander said, looking into the eyes of the woman who had saved his life in every way that mattered. Do you, Maya Johnson, take Alexander to be your husband? I do, Maya said, thinking about how far they had both come from that lonely hospital room. When they kissed, The small chapel erupted in cheers, but the biggest cheer came from the back of the room, where Dr. Stevens sat with tears in his eyes, amazed at the transformation he had witnessed. 1 year later, Maya sat in the rocking chair in the nursery of their home. Not Alexander's old penthouse, but a beautiful house in Maya's neighborhood, close to their medical center. She rubbed her growing belly and smiled as she felt the baby kick. "Someone's active today," Alexander said, coming into the room with 2 cups of tea. "I think he or she is excited to meet us," Maya said, accepting the warm cup gratefully. Alexander sat on the arm of the chair and put his hand on Maya's belly. "I still can't believe it. A year ago I thought my life was over. Now I have everything I never knew I wanted." "We have everything," Maya corrected gently. "And we're going to teach this little one that the most important things in life can't be bought." Alexander kissed the top of Maya's head. "I love you, Mrs. Kane." "I love you too," Maya said. "My husband, my partner, my best friend." As they sat together watching the sunset through their window, Alexander thought about the journey that had brought them here. Cancer had taken away his health for a while, but it had given him something far more precious, the ability to recognize true love when he found it. Maya had started as his nurse, but she had become his teacher, his healer, his everything. She had shown him that the richest life wasn't about having the most money, but about having the most love. And now, with their baby on the way, and their medical center helping hundreds of people every month, Alexander knew he was the wealthiest man alive. Not because of the numbers in his bank account, but because he had learned the secret that money can't buy: real love, shared purpose, and a family built on trust and genuine care. The billionaire who had once been abandoned by everyone had found the greatest treasure of all, a love that would never leave him, no matter what challenges lay ahead. Sometimes we have to lose everything to find what really matters, and sometimes the greatest wealth comes not from what we earn, but from who we choose to love. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe and tell us where you're watching from. We read every comment.